I'm 21, and I'm writing this from a hostel bathroom in Haicheng, a coastal city that pretends it's too small for secrets. I always loved mermaids. After I almost drowned at 5, real water became a mouth. Baths had to be ankle deep. I timed the faucet like a bomb, but I played underwater games for hours. Fake water didn't drown you. My father took my brother Harvey hookah diving off the rocks with bad gear. Harvey came back sick, then brain dead, then gone. No funeral. Only my mother smiling too wide as she popped a grape in a soda stream to explain bubbles and blood. Dad moved into a cliffside villa above the Bohai Sea. When I was 12, I finally went. The house was an aquarium you could live inside. Wall tanks, blue light, glass floors with shadows swimming under your feet. He called me downstairs like he was proud of the basement. The tank down there was bigger than a car, lit by green pinpricks like drowned stars. And inside, she floated up. A girl. Long black hair fanned around her face. Gills carved into her ribs. And where legs should have been, a blue tail. Scales stitched to skin like jewelry that hurt. When she smiled at me, something inside me unclenched. My stupid childhood dream, alive behind glass. A boy came after. Brown eyes, seaweed tangled in his hair, a scar across his throat. He didn't smile. He watched me like prey watches a door. Dad beamed. Habs, he said in Mandarin, like a science term made the horror polite. Human-like aquatic beings. Rare, beautiful, yours. I named them Ira and Falan because I was 12 and desperate to believe my father could make miracles instead of graves. For years I visited. Ira copied my expressions like a toddler. Falan hated me until I showed him Pokemon. Then he waited for me, pressed to the glass, hungry for color. Sometimes he broke the surface and tried to speak. Ira always dragged him down. At 18, I left for university in Nanjing, and I told myself Dad had released them. Then my lungs started failing. I woke up gasping, coughing, tasting pennies. Scans were normal. Inhalers didn't help. So I flew home and let myself into Dad's beach house while he was out. The basement steps were wet. The tank was bigger. Ira was still there, but she wasn't smiling. Her eyes were frantic, fingers drumming against glass. She pointed up, open, open, then at the stacked boxes behind me. I dug through them and found clothes. A yellow dress with dried rust at the collar, cargo shorts torn and stiff, a backpack with a Pikachu charm. Inside, a moldy sandwich, timetables, neat handwriting, 2 university IDs. Zhou Ziyu, 22, Chinese literature. Lin Chaoxin, 23, film and media. I vomited on the concrete. The mermaids weren't sea people, they were stolen humans. I went to the tank, shaking, and held Lin's ID to the glass. Ira, Lin, tilted her head like she couldn't remember what a name felt like. Then I heard it, dragging, wet slaps on stairs. Dad came down wearing a bloody apron, hauling a man by what used to be legs. Now it was a twisting, half-formed tail, skin split and stapled where scales were being grafted. The man's mouth opened in a soundless scream. It's okay, Dad soothed. You'll adapt once you can breathe. He lifted a knife and cut the man's throat with the calm of a chef. Blood ribboned down his chest. He dropped him into the water. The man sank. Then he jerked awake and exhaled bubbles like a reflex. Lin caught him while he pounded at the glass with fists already webbing. Dad scattered fish guts into the red cloud. The new merman ate because he had to. That's when I understood the drugging, the schedules. Why Lin only looked wild when the tank was fresh. I ran to Dad's office, the door he'd always kept locked, and found tanks of parts. Floating heads, torsos, limbs, labeled in careful handwriting. Diagrams of arteries beside sketches of tails. Notes about vocal reduction and gill incision. Falan, Zhou, was strapped to a surgical table, a tube down his throat. A sensor above him sprayed water every time he moved. When he lay still, his tail dried and split, trying to become legs again. Cruel stitches, wrong either way. He gagged red into the tube and hissed something that might have been my name. In the corner tank was Harvey. My brother's face was still my brother's. The rest was rot and scales, and a limp tail sewn to a decomposing torso. The flesh was breaking down, but something inside the stitches still twitched, like the sea refusing to let him finish dying. I left in 4 breaths and didn't stop running until my lungs burned like bleach. Yesterday morning, I woke coughing blood. In the shower, I found 3 slits under my ribs, left, then right, warm and tender. When the water hit them, they opened. Air makes me dizzy now. Water makes me clear. Mom is missing. Dad is gone. The basement is locked. Tell me what to do before I go back to the sea and never come up. I peered down the misty, dark, cobbled alleyway, almost unable to see my way through the district after a harrowing day of exams. Last one completed, I sighed, a tidal wave of relief, and headed back to my squalid apartment. The absolute silence of the street was broken only by the crisp tapping of my leather shoes on the pavement. My pace quickened as I heard something behind me, a sound that sent a shiver slithering down my spine. I'm not easily spooked, but when a sudden, unexpected hand thumped down on my shoulder, I froze and swung round, shaking. I gazed, trembling, at a military officer, impeccably turned out, gold gleaming, lapels starched to attention. "Tired, Chen?" he inquired, as though our paths had crossed before. Fatigue was the symptom of the obsessive, top achiever I'd become. The price? Now, rock bottom, a penniless student with nothing more than a few slivers of rancid food in the fridge and a pile of final demands on my worn coffee table. That's correct. We have not had the opportunity to get acquainted, he continued. His wide grin, abundant saliva, and saucer-like eyes felt wrong. Let's say I'm a government ambassador, searching, scouring for special intelligence. The country needs minds like yours. He nodded, scanning my frayed cuffs, second-hand blazer, and unkempt hair. Tuition loans, housing, salary, we take care of our own. He shrugged. 500,000 bonus. The wind was blistering, howling as we stood in the soupy fog. I made feeble excuses as he shoved an official card into my hand. I crept to the corner, turned it quickly, then sprinted back to my basement apartment. The dimly lit, glisteningly damp walls, the musty fragrance, and the kaleidoscope of reality hit me. I found myself forced, almost by inertia, to accept an invitation to a biomedical resilience trial. A black sedan arrived. We drove deep into the Qingcheng Mountains under a luminous harvest moon, through black, spiky forests, until we reached a windowless concrete block. An officer escorted me into a sterile white room and strapped me into a steel chair. High-ranking officials watched behind shimmering glass, while 2 riot police flanked me with rifles. "Just a precaution," he said, jamming a needle into my neck. The liquid, like fire, flooded my veins. Euphoria exploded in my brain. Muscles swelled, tearing my shirt. Restraints snapped like wet paper. I roared like a wild beast. The first guard ran. I launched myself, tearing his arm free from its socket. Blood splattered the walls and gushed as he collapsed, screaming. I seized the second guard by the throat, lifted him, and forced the rifle barrel down his throat. I pulled the trigger. An officer clawed at the observation door, screaming for help. The generals watched as I grabbed his head and slammed it into the concrete. His nose collapsed into his skull like something fragile. I drove my fist into his forehead. It cracked. Pink and gray matter oozed out, steaming in the cool air. Hungrily, I scooped a handful of the warm, wet substance and ate it. I saw his memories, secrets, fears, hopes, dreams, flash through me. Tearing the skin from his face, I ate until only a bloody bowl remained. I stood, blood dripping from my chin, and looked up at the generals. I catapulted through the glass, shattering it, and ripped them apart, one by one, limb by limb. The moon, wheat-colored and indifferent, sparkled above. I slid into the sedan. The facility faded in my rearview mirror. They wanted a weapon? I'm a predator. I'm heading east for Shanghai. And I'm starving. On my 8th birthday, a shadow walked into our apartment in Chengdu and extinguished my family. I remember the metallic tang of gun oil. My brother and sister sat motionless on the sofa, a red envelope still clutched in my brother's stiffening fingers. They looked peaceful, like they were sleeping. My mother lay by the overturned tea table, her favorite blue and white porcelain shattered around her. I didn't look at the shadow's face. I just stared at spilled tea, merging with blood, until a gun pressed against my spine. Turn around, a voice rasped. I did. I felt cold steel against my chest. A flash, a deafening crack, and then darkness. Just a lulling warmth, like sinking into the Yangtze on a summer day. I shouldn't have woken up. But I did, to the sound of a zipper screaming open in the hospital morgue. The nurse dropped her clipboard, face drained of blood. She said I'd been dead for 13 minutes, my heart shredded. Yet there I was, sitting up on the cold slab, asking for a glass of plum juice. They called it a miracle. My Auntie Lynn, my mother's wealthy twin, took me in. She lived in a sprawling estate near the misty peaks of Mount Qingcheng. But my cousin Bo didn't think I was a miracle. Bo was a strange, cruel boy who collected centipedes in jars. He looked at me with fear and disgust. "You're a mistake," he whispered when we were 12. "You're supposed to be dead, Wei." He would smirk and say, "Happy 68th birthday." Death tried to correct the error. Over the years, I choked on rice, nearly drowned in fishing nets, locked myself in a freezer. Every time, I woke up gasping, alive. Then I started seeing the ghosts. It began with Chen, a neighbor's boy who vanished years ago. On my 15th birthday, walking through the bamboo forest, I saw him. He wasn't a ghost, but flesh and blood, gray skin covered in inverted Taoist runes. He moved like a spider, pinning me against a stalk of bamboo, a rusted knife at my throat. His eyes were wild, weeping, as if his hands moved against his will. Just as he was about to slice, Auntie Lynn appeared. Chen flinched and scrambled away into the fog like a frightened dog. Auntie told me I was hallucinating. It ended on my 18th birthday. The house was quiet. Auntie canceled the party. Bo stood guard by the ancestral hall, pale in his silk suit. "Don't go downstairs, Wei," he trembled. "Just stay away." I didn't listen. I slipped down the stone steps. The basement smelled of incense and rotting meat. In the center was an old stone cistern. I saw Chen. He crouched on the floor, gorging on raw pork and ceremonial oranges. He was shirtless, and I saw what they had done. Protruding from his spine were massive, jagged growths, wings of bone and stretched human skin, like a grotesque cicada. He was shackled with glowing iron chains. He looked up, his mouth stitched, then ripped open. He smiled, a mouthful of blood. "Hi." Then I saw the other one. In the cistern, a girl with my dead sister's hair. She had the same shattered bone wings. "The king of the Black Mountain does not give gifts for free." Auntie Lynn's voice drifted from the shadows. She stepped into the light, holding a ceremonial dao. Bo stood behind her with a pistol, crying. "When your family died," Auntie said, stroking my cheek, "I made a deal. I bought you 100 years of life. But the Mountain King demanded heirs, vessels he could mold and strip of humanity for his court." She pointed the sword at them. "It takes 100 years of agony to turn a human into a demon. They are your battery way. 2 sacrifices. 1 for your heart, 1 for your lungs." Bo raised the pistol at the girl. Bang! She jerked. Then, a wet, sucking sound echoed. The wound knitted shut. She screamed in renewed agony. "Every scream buys you breath," Auntie said. She stepped toward Chen. The monster looked at me and smiled with pure hatred. "The ritual must be refreshed. Happy 78th birthday, Wei." I watched the blade fall. I watched the blood spray, feeding the spell that kept my stolen heart beating. I stood there, breathing air paid for by their torture, realizing the shadow hadn't killed me 10 years ago. It just turned me into something worse than a corpse. By the time the lock gave, the freezer exhaled once. Warm, wet air, and something inside clicked its teeth like it was cold. It happened in Long High Port, in a warehouse row that never made maps. Midnight shift. The junior customs runner named Wei, 2 dock cops, and a medic who kept wiping his gloves like the rubber was dirty. The first detail was small. A thin line of blood under the door, already tacky, already dark, with a smell like pennies left in the rain. They said it was just missing cargo, a container flagged wrong. Wei found the seal replaced with cheap tape, his fingers sticking to it. Inside, the lights from the dock cut in stripes over plastic-wrapped crates, over a steel table bolted to the floor, over a drain that pulsed as if it had a throat. There were handprints on the wall, smeared low, like someone had tried to crawl without knees. The medic leaned in and the air tasted metallic enough to numb his tongue. The first body wasn't a body yet. A man on a chair, wrists zip-tied, head hanging forward. His shirt was stiff with dried sweat and old blood. The chair legs were braced with bricks like they expected, struggling. Wei touched the man's neck and jerked back, skin colder than the room, but the pulse still there, stubborn and slow. Somewhere behind the crates, a phone buzzed once and went quiet. A soft scrape followed, too controlled to be a rat. Then the warehouse power flickered. Not off, just wrong. The strip light stuttered like a failing heart, and the room began arriving in pieces. A flash. Pliers on a tray, spotted brown. Another, a black bucket half full of cloudy water with something floating that didn't sink. Another, a pile of shoes, damp, stacked neatly, sizes mixed like they didn't matter. Sound narrowed. All that remained was breath in masks, the wet drip from the drain, and the distant thump of ships idling like bored animals. When the freezer opened, everything sped up. The door peeled away with a sound like skin. Cold fog rolled out, thick and sweet with rot, and the medic gagged so hard his eyes watered. Inside were stacked meat hooks, empty except for one that held a strip of torn cloth and a clump of hair frozen into it. At the bottom, under bags of ice and butcher paper, a woman lay folded wrong.
Knees pulled to chest, wrists bound with electrical wire, lips split and glued together with dried blood. Her fingers were still moving, slow and searching, nails black with frostbite, tapping the metal as if trying to remember what door sounded like. Wei didn't scream. He made a noise like air leaving a punctured lung. The dock cop closest to the freezer lifted his flashlight and the beam caught the drain pipe where it met the floor. The metal was scraped bright, fresh. Something was jammed in the grate. The medic pulled it free with 2 fingers and froze. It was a jawbone, clean in places, ragged in others, teeth still clamped shut as if refusing to talk. The lights steadied. The buzzing phone stopped. And from somewhere deeper in the crates, a slow, deliberate inhale answered them. Not panic, not hiding, just waiting. The report later said, multiple victims, unknown number. The footage was sealed under evidence tag 0241-C. In the still frame they kept, the freezer fog looks like smoke, and Wei's hand is caught mid-air, reaching, not to help, but to close the door and make the world smaller. Evidence tag 0241-C remains open.